Hello everybody and welcome to another Hong Kong review. Today we're doing more deep dive into the Shaw Brothers library from 88 Films Asian Collection. This video will feature The One-Armed Swordsman, a Shaw Brothers classic, 1967 by Jimmy Wang, who I've recently looked at from the One-Armed Boxer from I think Eureka's lineup, I think early on this year. Didn't really find much value in that, if I'm being absolutely honest, didn't really connect with that from that much. But this film was quite interesting to say the least. So let's go and check out The One-Armed Swordsman. One-Armed Swordsman was released in 1967, directed by Chan Shea, who's the guy behind Five Elemental Ninjas, Crippled Avengers, The Masked Avengers, a lot of Avengers apparently, and responsible for some of the kind of sequels and kind of, remakes and kind of, continuations of the kind of the One-Armed Swordsman kind of series that became over the couple of years. The director really made a big name for himself within the kind of Shaw Brothers kind of like, legacy kind of thing, as you said, really changed the game in terms of kind of cinematography, in terms of style, in terms of really kind of bringing something new to the kind of the genre of kind of Hong Kong cinema during that kind of time, and really kind of pioneered with Jimmy Wang, who's the main star of this film. Really interesting to kind of see the kind of the progression from this point onwards, and what the kind of both their kind of careers led up to during the kind of the decade that were to come kind of thing. Obviously Jimmy Wang eventually would leave Shaw Brothers and go to work with Golden Harvest and make some of his own films, start his own production company, and kind of had a kind of lukewarm sort of like an experience over the kind of the 70s and 80s and 90s kind of thing, and did a lot of kind of cheap movies here and there, but also made some really kind of big movies at the same time. Most of kind of Jimmy Wang's movies, surprisingly, have all had franchises, including the one on Boxer, including the Chinese Boxer, and obviously One-Armed Swordsman kind of thing. He likes to do continuations and kind of sequels to his most successful films, which I completely understand, because hey, look at the current kind of modern kind of setting we're living in right now with the superhero genre. But in fact, my experience with Jimmy Wang is very limited to kind of thing. I've only seen like maybe two of his movies, if you count Dragon. I've saw obviously One-Armed Boxer kind of from Eureka's lineup a couple of months back, and I felt with that film it was a kind of definitely a demonstration of his skill set. It's directed by him, it's obviously produced by him, and he's doing everything on screen that he can possibly could do to kind of show off what his talents are. And I definitely think it's more of a kind of CV movie in terms of an actual film. It's the story, the characters are really kind of like minuscule. And granted, Hong Kong movies aren't always known for their grand big stories kind of thing. We're in the kind of the early kind of 60s and 70s kind of things, more about the kind of the fights. But I do feel if you can do both, why not kind of thing. One-Armed Swordsman actually is a nice surprise for me, an actual Shaw Brothers film that actually lives up to its kind of its hype, to its legacy kind of thing, and to see why people are so obsessed with this story and this character and this world, and why there's so many kind of spin-offs and remakes and countless kind of interpretations, and there's so many different movies that I ripped off this one that I can see now. That it's kind of shocking really, but I can understand because the story is so simple, the characters are so well defined, the action's interesting, and it's such a well-presented 2-hour film. The film itself has this really grand kind of multi-layered kind of structure that I found really fascinating, really interesting to see how it plays along within the actual film itself. It does things that I wouldn't usually expect from kind of a late 60s type of movie. It does choices, and it plays with kind of themes and kind of messages about kind of honor and respect and kind of service, kind of thing, loyalty, where is your fealty kind of thing to your master. And it plays upon those ideas. And we've seen this before within kind of IP Man kind of thing, and I found the story for this film actually really riveting and really engaging from kind of start to finish. I think the opening kind of portion of the film, the first act of the film, I think is really solid. The pace, I think it's beautifully shot, and I think it really sets up a lot of the kind of the high end of what the second half is of the film kind of thing, with the opening being a really good establishing kind of sequence with the the father character sacrificing himself for his master, the son being kind of left as an orphan, being taken in by the kind of Grand Master. Character grows up, and he's played by Jimmy Wang, the main character of the film, of course, and he is really guilt-ridden. He is really kind of bring himself down to the kind of the bare bone, and he feels unworthy of kind of the teachings. He feels unworthy of that family, or he feels outcasted in a certain way by the kind of the mean kind of brothers and kind of sisters that he kind of has during the film. And he kind of constantly is taught, and he's doing things that traditionally a person in his kind of statue wouldn't usually do. He's been, he's been fed, he's been warmed, he's been clothed, but he chooses to wear non-luxury clothing. He wears kind of peasant kind of clothing, he chops wood, he does kind of, servant type tasks, because he feels beneath the kind of the offerings that have been given to him kind of thing. He feels like his debt has not been paid, and there's kind of this massive guilt that is kind of glooming over him for most of the film that I think is really interesting for a character to really get to know and to kind of see why he feels the way he does. And obviously through the course of the film, and the fact that he kind of loses his arm during the process of a kind of a squabble, accidental kind of, you know, kind of way kind of thing, but it works with the film quite well. The fact it just happens off guard by someone who really kind of like has no real skill set, in a sense, just a complete accident. Not only am I kind of got my soul kind of being burnt kind of thing by this massive amount of weight, not only am I kind of a cripple now within a world where martial arts, where kind of, you know, statue and kind of honor is a massive thing, but I got to deal with this as well. It's kind of another thing added to the pile kind of thing. And he eventually finds a young woman that helps him heal, learns there's another life, there's another thing he can do. And another surprising aspect of the film, that there's kind of teachings of how he kind of, you know, builds his strength over this kind of palm kind of attack kind of thing, and he builds his kind of right arm really strong, and he kind of how he uses the kind of the one arm kind of swordsman kind of kung fu kind of style kind of fighting is down to a burn book that this woman had from her father, who died tragically, you know, defending their honor kind of thing. And it's interesting, one, he loses his arm down to an accident through a kind of a half sister, and yet he finds a redemption, the kind of the key to his success and his skill set further from another woman that he loves and cares for him and wants him to succeed. So it's two opposite ends of the coin there. One is taking away and one is receiving. I found that aspect and that kind of you know, metaphor quite interesting for the film and what it tries to tell. And it comes down to the kind of the halfway point of the film, where he's giving a choice between who does he want to be as a character, who does he want to be as a person. Does he want to be this kind of grand kind of, you know, grandmaster kind of, you know, legendary kind of swordsman, or does he simply want to be a farmer? Does he want to have a nice simple life, maybe get some kids with this woman that clearly cares for him and loves him? You know, he is torn between those two worlds. And while that aspect is playing out really well in the film, and you kind of get this nice kind of brewing, kind of bubbling kind of hero story, you kind of get this grand story around it, with kind of the main disciples coming all for this kind of Grandmaster's birthday. It's his 55th birthday, and he's going to retire, and he's going to aim as a successor and heir to kind of take on his kind of his legacy, his world, his kind of his teachings kind of thing, and he wants to have a specific heir to kind of teach that onwards. And all these kind of disciples are coming in to kind of meet him. An old kind of adversary of him, you know, kind of always kind of looming in the background kind of thing. You never see his face until the end of the film, which I think is really cool. He's got kind of his spears in his back, he's got a whip, he's got some really badass weapons. One of the things I find interesting also about the film is that they introduce these really kind of wacky, kind of crazy weapons called like the lock sword. I think it's kind of like 64 style kind of training you need to have to learn how to use it. And basically what it does, it kind of locks in your kind of golden sword, and it goes in for this kind of dagger swoop. It's a really nasty kind of, you know, tactic. I think it's purely cheating, if I'm being absolutely honest. I think it's a really dishonorable, really kind of horrible way to go kind of thing of style. But I think that concept is really interesting. And what is it about Hong Kong cinema and doing kind of wacky kind of ideas, you know, fly guillotine as well kind of thing. I always kind of see these kind of really kind of crazy weapons within kind of Hong Kong movies, but this one I thought was quite interesting, and I think it really helped the kind of second half fight sequences, because I thought a lot of the fight sequences in the film up until that point were very kind of tamed or kind of very amateur kind of thing. I don't think they were really that impressive. It's definitely very kind of Peking opera style kind of forms kind of thing, with the kind of jumping and flying kind of thing, and back rolls and kind of, you know, the hits and the blocks kind of thing. It's definitely very familiar that I've seen with other kind of Hong Kong movies, but I didn't think they were massively interesting until they introduced this weapon, which made it a lot more interesting, which made the stakes a lot more interesting. And they have this great montage sequence during the kind of middle act of the film, where they're taking out loads of people, you know, through kind of various kind of ways, and I think that's a really kind of effective use of the tool, and it kind of showing how much they're kind of invading kind of thing. And the one-armed swordsman, he's kind of learning his craft, he's learning this kind of new form kind of thing, but it's not like a massive kind of magic book that's going to heal everything, that's going to, you know, take on this kind of new kind of 64 kind of style lock sword play. It's just a way of him using the tools he's got. He makes his arm much stronger, makes it much more powerful. He learns how to use kind of the broken blade that he's got from his father during the start of the film. He also uses how to use the kind of the golden sword. That's something he couldn't use. And I think that's a really good progression for the character, and kind of, you know, he's not just going in there kicking ass, he's learning, he's observing, he's seeing what this kind of style is, and he's finding a way to kind of counteract that. And he's got his own kind of sneaky shit as well, obviously with a smaller sword, which he can do really maximal damage. And this is shown early on as well with him kind of doing training, showing how powerful his kind of arm is, showing how powerful his kind of swing is in that sense. So you're really going to get the sense of how good he is up to this point kind of thing. He's already great kind of thing during the start of the film, but he's even better now. I really love how this world, this kind of story is told and presented through the cinematography, through the editing. You know, I think it's really well paced. Obviously there's some moments here and there that I think linger on a little bit too long, but I think it's really kind of daring for the film to do some of the choices that I would expect it would do. It definitely takes its time. It definitely builds up the kind of the hero journey. It definitely takes its time with the villains. Places the kind of the fight sequences in the right amount of moments that's crucial for the story to kind of have those moments kind of thing. I think once introduced as weapons, it definitely gets a lot better for the fight sequences. But I think the look of the film, the style of the film, I think is really well done. I think the music choices are pretty good as well. I really like where the story goes. And so overall, One-Armed Swordsman really delivers a really classic kind of Shaw Brothers 101 kind of tale. I think, you know, it does have some kind of faults in places, maybe some pacing issues, maybe some scenes linger on a bit too much. Some of the fight sequences aren't as kind of polished or interesting compared to what I would be, but it does get better. Everything about the film gets more interesting, it gets more engaging in terms of the character, in terms of the story, in terms of the high stakes, in terms of interesting kind of choices that the film chooses to go along in terms of its pacing, the way he loses on, the way he gets his kind of new skill sets, the way the ending of the film is, the villains, their motivations, their kind of, the other kind of, the interesting kind of sword plays with the kind of locked arm swords. It has so much intrigue to the world and to kind of and plays the idea of kind of honor and kind of fealty within that kind of world. That makes for a truly entertaining kind of classic kind of heroes kind of journey. And I think it's all really well presented, and I think it's all really well kind of crafted on screen, and I actually had a really good time with it. And of course I got One-Armed Swordsman on the kind of 88 kind of Asian Collection Blu-ray, which is a really nice kind of little edition. There you go there. There's not much of extras. There is two kind of extras on this edition. One by David West, kind of an interview looking at the kind of the series and kind of picking out kind of aspects of the director, his kind of his legacy and the kind of what this film meant to kind of Hong Kong cinema going forward. Very interesting kind of little mini documentary. You've got an audio commentary also. That's been my review for One-Armed Swordsman. I hope you enjoyed watching this review, guys. What did you think of the film? Please comment down below. What do you think of the sequels? I'm looking forward to seeing your thoughts and opinions on the kind of the various kind of spin-offs and remakes. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, guys. Until next time, guys, Amphlett Reviews, signing out.